She didn't use the microphone. She didn't use the microphone.
She doesn't use the mic. Why?
We don't know.
In both cases. I wish you could know. So, okay. So let's do without microphone. Do you think I can do without microphone and the record is going to be okay? No, it's not. It is not. What? Alex, yeah. So probably somebody put his phone in charge and not loud. Alex, what's the matter?
These days, these people are messing with my mental health. One day I'm gonna explode, shout.
Good. So,
The problem was my phone.
Alex, can you try?
Hello.
Can you say something, please?
Hi. Hi.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we habemos program, which means we have a program for the conference. So, first of all, let's thank Lynn, who did a great job. So, thank you very much, Lynn. So, we have a program. We have a program Tuesday. I remind you, instead of doing our last conference, we have a general conference in the afternoon, 4 hours. We're going to discuss about democracy. You find an introduction about what are we going to discuss conceptually. I'm very happy. It's a good statement of purpose. Then we have the institutional addresses from the director of the department, the coordinator of the pre-program, and then I'm going to make a short introduction, and Sabrina is going to make a short introduction. Then we're going to have, in the first section, we're going to have all the presentation on what are Western alternatives to democracies. What is, the Western, the non-Western critique to democracy. It's going to start Sabrina by explaining to us what is post-colonial theory. Then we're going to have a presentation on how democracy works in Africa, or how political institutions work in Africa. Two presentations on the Iranian political theories, Iranian political thought. One presentation on Confucius as the foundation of Asian political thought. Then we're going to have one presentation from a PhD student on Kurdistan, on how the Kurdish try to organize different forms of democracy. Okay, this is panel one. So panel one, we put all the last presentation we had for the conference, we have put it here. Then we're going to have three other panels. 1 hour each panel. So all in all, 4 panels, 4 hours. Okay? We have Professor Borlino from Contemporary History is going to introduce, and also Lynn is going to say something. And then we have a presentation on what? Democracy, Democracy, how democracy works in Turkey, how works in Italy, India, Vietnam. So, Bach is going to present his critique on Western democracies, right? And what? PR. Yeah, okay. So you see explain why Asian communism works better than Western democracies, right? So then we have the third panel, Professor Kuzumanov, third year political science, is gonna introduce together with Erika, and then we're gonna have presentations on Sri Lanka, Alex, and then we're gonna have a small war because we have Ukraine, Russia, and Crimea all together, explaining how war affects democracy, and vice versa. And then last part is the last panel is gonna be about social movements, political representation, economy, and so on. This morning, Lydia Lo Schiavo wrote me a message, I would like to participate. So I called her, and if you wanted to participate, you should have asked Sabrina a message. She said, no, I didn't see it, blah, blah, blah. We have Professor Lo Schiavo, general sociology. She teaches in which year?
First year.
First year. So you already know her, she's going to introduce, blah, blah, blah. And so we're going to have Diaria da Lucia. Lucia is going to talk us about, Latin America, very important, social movement and democracy in Latin America. Charlotta from the third year, from Uzbekistan. And then we have a PhD guy, Ruben is a PhD candidate, and he's going to talk about democracy and economic inequality, because we wanted to address this and we don't have it. So we have a beautiful, beautiful program, right? And a beautiful also flyer. So this is going to be our last class, Tuesday. So before entering the last class, so we have class today and we have class on Monday. So let's try to get rid of the last thinkers we need to address. So in the last classes we entered the 20th century and we talked about Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, Max Weber, and Carl Schmitt. So Nietzsche, we have to remind that his critique to Western civilization, his critique to Enlightenment, which is summarized by the way to say God is dead, and we have killed him because we have replaced God, the immensity of God, the beautiful divine image of God, we have replaced it with a blind faith in the cold essence of science, reason, and all this boring thing and the morality of the slaves. We only want to protect the weak instead of valuing the strong values that we had in ancient civilization. We have to rebuild our values from scratch. We have to become our own God. He tried to become his own God and he got mad, he got crazy. Then we had Max Weber also. He tried to, develop in a more scientific way the crisis of modernity. And so he said modernity is this process of general rationalization, which happened mostly through the state in the political sphere and through capitalism in economic sphere, who try to rationalize all our existence in society by giving us, a regular job for all our life, by putting division of labor, organizing economy, organizing production through capitalism, and by providing the legal, rational, bureaucratic form of power through the state. So he makes this analysis, but he says this rationalization is an iron cage. We got trapped in this rationalization. We got trapped because we have to live, under this bureaucracy of the state, which we built to serve our ends, to serve our goals, but now we are trapped because every time we try to do something to the administration, to bureaucracy, it becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. Because he answers not to us, but it answers to these rational rules, which are more and more understandable, becomes more and more complicated, and so on. And in economic life, capitalism traps us in an iron cage in which you have to do the same repetitive, boring work for all your life, and everything is organized rationally also in this ground. So he also critiques, this. He analyzes Enlightenment, Western modernity, rationalization through this critical lens. And then we had addressed Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt is a Nazi jurist. It's a Nazi jurist because it doesn't like liberalism. So what he says is liberalism is trying to neutralize politics. For liberalism, there is a general consensus about human rights, political rights, the rule of law, constitutionalism, balance of power, check and balance, divisions of power. These are the general values of liberalism. And for liberalism, say, yeah, we have to promote these general values. But this is not politics. Not politics. Because for Carl Schmitt, there is politics exists only under one condition. Lucia, well, when does it exist, politics, for Carl Schmitt?
When there is a friend and an enemy.
Yeah. So, it exists politics only when there is a division between two different positions, between two different parts. Indeed, the word party, political party, comes from parts. So there is politics only at the moment in which you have two parts who are conflicting each other about one point. And these two parts, they have, political dialogue, a political conflict, a political confrontation, but at the end, there must be the possibility of a war, of an armed conflict about this point, So there is a distinction between the friend and the enemy. You divide the field between those who are your friends and those who are your enemies. Public enemies, political enemies. You might even like them, You might even like them, but, you're divided by this thing, So it's not a private enemy. It's not a moral person that you don't like. It's a public enemy in the sense that you must be ready to confront the thing. So like for example, let's consider Hannah Arendt and Martin Heidegger. Now it doesn't work. It does not work because I have to change. So, yeah, you see, as we see, let's get back to Nietzsche from this problem. So Nietzsche, what does he say, Nietzsche? This you remember. He says, Western civilization, enlightenment, and so on, it glorifies progress, scientific progress, technological progress, but then this progress is based on nothing because in your daily life you become a slave of this device that you cannot control and you're becoming a slave. So this is why I say this faith in technological progress is nihilism, because it annihilates your existence that becomes subordinated to technology, to science. So as you see, for half part of the course we have to see why it doesn't work, because it never works. So this is nihilism for Nietzsche. This is nihilism. Why? Right, I have to say that to duplicate the screen. So you see, basically we say, technology is so beautiful, it brings us progress, we will go far away with technology, and then, we're enslaved by this machine that actually dominate us, because we have to obey to their own rules, to understand the rules, to obey to what they say, to what they want. So Carl Schmitt was saying that the enemy is to the point that you have an enemy which is not a private enemy, it's not morally enemy. For example, if I like Lynn, or if I like one of you and you like me, but we divided on a point, we still like each other. But we have a division on a point, so we're public enemies, like it was the case of our friends Hannah Arendt and Martin Heidegger. So Martin Heidegger was the professor of Hannah Arendt, and he was a great philosopher, a great existentialist philosopher. He made a theory of being, of the being. He made a great theory of existence. But politically, he was a disaster. But philosophically, he was a real master. So he taught philosophy to Hannah Arendt. They got in love, and she was so much in love with him, and vice versa. But when the Nazis took power, he became a Nazi. the Nazi. He entered the Nazi party while she was a Jewish. So she had to escape Germany to avoid to finish at the concentration camp. So we address Hannah Arendt. Why? Because she is the most important theorist of the concept of totalitarianism. She created the concept of totalitarianism to describe what was happening in her age. What was happening in her age was fascism, was Nazism. So she developed this concept of totalitarianism to say what is fascism, what is Nazism. You know, because until the moment, until Hannah Arendt, we only had the ancient concept, notions like despotism, like tyranny. But she said, this is not despotism, this is not tyranny, we need a new concept. And this new concept is totalitarianism, because it tries to control all society with all means. It tries to use technology, it tries to use mass propaganda to control society in all its aspects. So, let's say again, what are the foundations? What are the main things of totalitarianism? Totalitarianism, you need first of all racism. Racism is crucial for totalitarianism. To have a totalitarian regime, you need racism is always a very important ingredient. Very important ingredient. So, but here we can understand why it's so important. Lucia, why it's so important to be racist, to build up a totalitarian regime?
Because it creates the difference. Like there is a group and another group.
Yeah, so it creates the so these two groups are
friends and enemy.
yeah. So it creates the enemy. The enemy.
Yes.
So yeah. So racism creates the enemy. So you can coagulate, you can unite the friends against this enemy. You know, this is why if there was Germany under Nazis, they were getting out. They lost World War I very badly. They were humiliated by the peace treaties. They got economic crisis. They got terrible inflation. You know, they got terrible inflation. Hitler started to say, this is because within our society we have this internal enemy who controls the bank system, who controls money, who controls everything, who steals our jobs, and so on and so forth. And so he said the Jewish are our enemy. This is the enemy. And so you know that when you can find an enemy, you are strong. You are strong. It's very crucial to build up a political party. But this is not an enemy in the sense of Carl Schmitt, actually, what Hitler did. Because Hitler didn't say the Jews are our own enemies, public enemy. He said this is a biological enemy, because it's a race. It's a race who treats our race. So he invented the field of the friends, he invented the Aryan population, you know, which were the Germans, but also those living in Austria and a part in Poland, and so on and so forth. So you know, he says the friend is all our race, and the enemy, the Jewish, are our enemy, but it's not a public enemy. It's a biological enemy. It's a private enemy. So you cannot just fight them. You should neutralize, eliminate, cancel them. And so he started to build up the extermination camps. Extermination camps is the moment in which Western civilization uses all its technological knowledge to build up Hoven, to kill people. Very important moment in history, you know. And this was based on this idea that there was an enemy which is not only a public enemy, a biological enemy. To protect your nation, you have to destroy this other race. So racism is very, 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 very important. Then you have mass society. You have a mass society in the sense that society is very, very, very much individualized. It's very much individualized, and you have all these individuals who feel isolated in society and can recognize the leader as the leader of the nation. So it's very different. It's not a society which is divided into classes with different interests, as for example socialism, Marxism says. It's a class based on individuals. These individuals are alone and they recognize the leader who leads them. Totalitarianism, and then you have propaganda. Propaganda, you know, this happens in a moment in which you have very powerful means for propaganda. When fascism and Nazism went power, you know, you had all these new means to, okay, you had the radio, and so you have mass printing, mass newspapers, so you have these means for propaganda, you know, because propaganda is crucial. This is why right now is so concerning the political use of social media, because through social media, you know, through this control and through this daily and constant way of entering the private life of all individuals, you can really build new totalitarian things. And then you use terror. So the authority of totalitarianism is based on fear. So the use of fear is legitimate because you think you have a nation. You think you have this body of friends which is a nation, and you have to protect the nation. And so when you have to protect the nation, any means is allowed. So you can use terror, you can use, police, you can remove the right to speech because the totalitarian movement is defending the blood of the nation. So we clearly see that nowadays, in these days, we have similar things because we have a crisis of the globalization that was based on liberal principles, neoliberal principle, on the ideas of globalization, that the idea was that slowly globalization after the end of Cold War between USSR and USA, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, the idea was that slowly all the world was going to become liberal democracies because capitalism was expanding all over the world, and what we could see is that capitalism was bringing liberal democracies, was bringing democratic institutions. So this is what, so we got international organizations like G20, G8, WTO, World Trade Organization, OECD, Organization for Cooperation and Development, United Nations, and so on. So we had all these international organizations to control how we can make a governance of globalization in the idea that globalization was going towards establishing liberal democracies all over the world. It didn't go this way. And right now we're facing nationalism because working class in Western countries especially, they feel globalization didn't help us to improve our conditions. We see that there is this mass migration of people who are stealing our job, our conditions are getting worse, and so they say we want to get back to the nations. We don't want to get back to the nations. So why Donald Trump won the election? Because he say America first. Let's go back to the idea of America, because the United States of America was something different, was not anymore a nation, was trying to develop a global empire based on his financial interests, was in this economic domination all over the world. So he was making wars, he was trying to police the world, and Donald Trump said, okay, let's go back to America first. Let's make America great again as a nation. Let's do mass deportation of all the migrants, and then You have national parties also, growing up in Germany, again, because in Germany you have AfD Alternative Deutschland, who says, yeah, we have to do de-immigration, re-immigration. We have to send back all migrants to their countries. And also in Italy we have far right government because they use it very well. The point of saying migration is a problem. Migrants are our enemies right now that are killing our society because they're selling drugs in the street, they're raping women, they're stealing jobs, and so on and so forth. So, the point is, we will go again in the direction of totalitarianism, yes or not. Because the problem when you have nationalist movement is that they want to say our nation must be more powerful than the other nation. We have to protect the interest of our nation, but often is in conflict with the interest of other nations. So often it ends up in words. Like, for example, Putin is for sure a nationalist Russian and is supporting Russian nationalism, who say we have to protect our nation against the Western countries trying to control Ukraine. So totalitarianism. You have a mass society, you have a strong leader, you have an ideology based on the internal enemy, and you have the use of terror. Hannah Arendt was very smart philosopher in describing this and in inventing this notion. So he wrote this book, The Origin of Totalitarianism, to describe totalitarianism as a distinct form of government, a distinct form of government to want to create a new political system. Okay, so this is one part. So the book, you see the principles in the slides. The book is The Origin of Totalitarianism. But we consider two books by Hannah Arendt. We consider two books. One is The Origin of Totalitarianism, in which she established the principles of totalitarianism, and the other book is Eichmann in Jerusalem. It's about Eichmann in Jerusalem, which is the banality of evil. The other book, so one book is The Origin of Totalitarianism, and the other is The Banality of Evil. So she made pretty interesting and big case. So this is Hannah Arendt when she emigrated to New York.
Hast du die Zeitung noch nicht gelesen?
Exakt, das hatte.
Die waren in Jerusalem vor Gericht stehen.
Isn't it incredible that the Hannah Arendt is offering to report for us? She should be begging to write for the New Yorker.
Musst du dir das wirklich antun?
Ich würde mir das nie verzeihen, wenn ich diese Gelegenheit nicht wahrnehmen würde.
To Hannah, in honor of her trip to Jerusalem.
Dieser Prozess ist sehr wichtig für uns.
Hat man Ihnen nachgewiesen, dass die Juden müssen vernichtet werden? Ich habe sie vernichtet.
Eichmann kein Antisemit? Was ist denn das für ein Unfug?
Das ihn doch selber gehört, er hat nur dem Gesetz geholfen.
Hannah, bitte, du kannst das so nicht schreiben, nicht für den New Yorker.
They were recognized Jewish leaders, and this leadership cooperated with the Nazis. They'll have our heads for this.
In den Daily News gab es folgende Schlagzeile. Hannah Arendt's bizarre defense of Eichmann.
Sie denken, deine Artikel sind großartig. Und die wünschen dir den Tod. Manche sogar auf sehr fantasievolle Weise.
The greatest evil in the world is the evil committed by no one.
Did you really have no idea there would be such a furious reaction?
Time to understand is not the same as forgiveness.
Diesmal bist du zu weit gegangen.
It is this phenomenon that I have called the banality of evil.
So, what happened to Hannah Arendt? What happened to Hannah Arendt? Erika, you have a presentation, right? Yeah. Come on. Now, Yeah. So, what happened to Hannah Arendt? That right now we're gonna see more in detail. What happened? What happened? Is that we have. So let's remind. Hannah Arendt is a German Jewish who had to escape Nazi Germany because Hitler was gonna exterminate all the Jewish, so his family and so on. So this is the context, and she escapes to New York City, and she becomes an important. Start making your things. So she escaped to New York City. Okay, she goes to the United States of America to live there. When she lives there, you know what happened? It happens an important thing because World War II was ended. All the Nazi Germans were processed. There was a trial in Nuremberg and so on. But there was one guy who did escape from Germany and was not taken. You know, he was the number two on Nazism because number one was Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler shot himself because he didn't want to die. Eichmann survived and escaped to Argentina because Argentina, you have this horrible regime of of fascism, and they were saying, okay, come German Nazis, we're gonna protect you. So he escaped. He made a new life in Argentina. What was the point of Eichmann? Eichmann was in charge of the so-called final solution. So Hitler went to Eichmann and said, Eichmann, you have to exterminate all the Jews. Okay, this is your task. Now look, it's not a good thing. Right? To exterminate all the Jews. No, it's not the same. Yeah. No, so she has you use her to. Okay. Who do you want to exterminate? International students. You want to exterminate international students. Okay, so let's say I'm Hitler, she's Eichmann. She's, I say, this Jewish problem, we have a problem with Jews, we have too many Jews and blah, blah, blah. What can we do? And you say, yeah, we can do the final solution. We can kill all of them. And Hitler say, good idea, Eichmann, you're gonna do it. Okay, so Eichmann was in charge of exterminating all the Jews. When Germany was defeated, he escaped to Argentina. At the same time, World War II was ended, as a reparation, Western countries established Israel as a Jewish nation, So, Israel, first thing that say, we're a nation right now, we have to go retaliation against the guy who wanted to exterminate all of them. So at the end they managed to go to Argentina to kidnap him and to bring him to Jerusalem and to make a public trial against the guy who tried to kill all the people. So, the Jewish, they take things seriously. Even if you read the Torah, you have this God that is pretty bad. He's very good in retaliation. So, they wanted to do this. They do a public trial, the most important trial in the 20th century. So, what Hannah Arendt did, when she wrote to the New York Times, sometimes she was writing articles for the New York Times, and they say, New York Times, send me to Jerusalem. I want to write for your journal about this process. I'll be there, and every day I will provide you an article on this. So she flies to Jerusalem, and she writes about this article. But she makes a philosophical theory about what was happening there. And this philosophical theory produced some kind of problems. But before we get to this concept of the banality of it, let's recap again what is totalitarianism so that we can go to this other concept very well. Erika, why are you looking at me like this? So, yeah.
Hello. I would like to talk about totalitarianism, and we're gonna focus on what is in general and some historical examples, for example, like fascism, Nazism, and Stalinism. And then we're gonna talk about Hannah Arendt specific, one of her most famous book, which is The Origin of Totalitarianism. And then an example of, I wrote it wrong, of an example nowadays, which is North Korea. So, the term of totalitarianism has become widely used, often meaning a dictatorial regime, and however, it has sparked debates among historians. Some argue that it oversimplifies and ignores the difference between regimes, and others believe that it's useful to describe similarities of regime. So, in 1923, Giovanni Amendola first used the term totalitarianism to describe fascism as a promise of absolute domination, so during Mussolini period. And then only in 1929, the English press applied the term to Nazism, fascism, and communism, referring to regimes seeking total control. And basically, the first time it was used as a totalitarian regime was written by Hannah Arendt and Friedrich Karl Friedrich. So this regime has some common features like the construction of an organic and coherent ideology with a rereading of the world, and so basically with only one single party, and all the citizens of that regime should have to agree. Then the manipulation of information through the use of mass propaganda, media of which the regime holds the monopoly, and the economy was also subjected to the control of the state. And of course, we have a charismatic dictator, which with absolute power, and who creates of himself a cult. And the mass are conditioned in managing time, marked by celebration, rituals, and identification signs. Then we're gonna talk about Stalinism. After Lenin's death, the Russian Revolution lost its leader, but the struggle for secession had already begun. The Bolsheviks were divided into factions, Stalin and Trotsky. For Stalin, he believed that the focus should be on consolidating Russian communism and possibly expanding it through all Europe or throughout the world. And Trotsky argued that the union of Soviet Socialist Republics' mission was to split the permanent revolution worldwide by supporting and arming revolutionary movements. But Stalin gained power, and he started his regime of totalitarianism, He eliminated his political rivals and established a personal dictatorship characterized by terror and also including the famous Great Purges. And Stalin aimed to transform Russia's major city through ambitious projects like the subway in Moscow and also the seventh skyscraper, like this one. I think they're so beautiful. And he wants to reproject this subway like a palace of the Tsar instead of a normal subway. Then one of the more common features of totalitarianism is propaganda. Stalin, through media and newspaper, he showed his opponents, his enemies, as the enemies of the country. So he put the idea of these people through the mass, like they're not too good. Okay, there's an example of George Orwell. The Big Brother is watching you is literally the example of totalitarianism regime. Like Big Brother is everywhere. He controls you, also your private life. you can do basically nothing. So you are under this one person, and he critiques, oral critiques Stalinism. He compared Big Brother to Soviet Union system. No, è del farlo male sto cosa, mi sta venendo l'ansia. Via.
Vuoi parlare senza?
Sì. Oh, grazie. Adesso questo qua, manca possibilmente tanti. Comunque, then we have oh. Then we have fascism in Italy. I'm not gonna talk a lot because yesterday we had a great presentation. I don't know if she's here. Maybe you, yeah, you had a great presentation. So basically, since the mid-1920s, the fascist regime has begun to empty the representative institution in favor of the single party, which is the Grand Council of Fascism and Vittorio Emanuele III. And in 1929, the election, which included only a single list, confirmed the population support for fascism and laid the foundation for the transition from the authoritarian regimes into totalitarian regimes. So, which Mussolini described the new state. So, basically, there was this 22 corporation were established to present different sectors of the economy, and with both employers and employees participating, and the cooperatives were state controlled, but they never had issues of meeting. So this is just like, how is it, the face, but behind there was something more like mafia. Then Mussolini also used propaganda, where they were everywhere, in the billboards, building faces, also with the huge face of Mussolini. And the government also controlled the media, silencing opposition and showing only state-approved content. So this allowed to Mussolini to control the public perception and create a cult of himself. And there is Mussolini adopted the title of Duce, which claimed a connection to ancient Rome and presenting himself as a new Caesar. Then we have the other example of totalitarianism regime. But one thing, fascism was not total regime, totalitarian regime, because it was with the king, so it wasn't that absolute power. Then we have Nazism, and the Nazi ideology was formulated by Hitler and spread in Mein Kampf during his imprisonment. And in Mein Kampf, Hitler outlined his plan for an authoritarian government that would restore Germany's greatness. And the Nazi ideology was based on the concept of Volk, which means people, and the state as a community founded on biological purity and racial homogeneity to restore the German greatness, and the end Germans as the Aryan superior race. So even though there is no scientific proof that the Aryan people are the superior level of as a person, the stereotypical image of the Aryan man is destined to dominate all the inferior race. So that's why also the Eichmann in Jerusalem for the Jewish people. And then also here the Nazi regime quickly took control because Hitler used nationalist feelings and economic struggles and fear of communism to gain support. And in 1933 he became chancellor, and after Reichstag fire he passed the Reichstag fire decree and suspending all the civil liberties and the arresting political opponents. So there is this quote written by Ernst Rudolf Huber, a Nazi legal scholar, which is: Die Autorität des Führers ist total und allumfassend. In ihr fließen alle verfügbaren Ressourcen der Nation zusammen. Sie umfasst jeden Aspekt des Lebens des Volkes. So in English it means the authority of the Führer is total and encompassing. Hitler's absolute power over every facet of Germany's life, Germany's people life. And then the Nazi regime also had controlled many aspects of German life, the labor from brought together employers and workers. The Hitler youth trained and indoctrinated young people. The scholar programs were changed to match the regime's beliefs, and in the end, also the free time were controlled by the state to continue the indoctrination. And also, the other totalitarianism regime used propaganda, newspapers, cinema, and also they understand the power of the emerging scientific. Availability, like cinema, loudspeaker, radio, all through the street. There was this music or poetry saying, Nazism is the best system of government. Then we have this album by Pink Floyd, which covers various themes such as childhood, reflects some influence from Nazi imagery and ideology, especially in the portrayal of isolation, control, and authoritarian figures, which can be linked to themes like oppression and dehumanization. Then we have this beautiful woman, the first political thinker, which she was a strong and independent woman, and who deeply studied the philosophical thoughts of many ancient and modern thinkers. And she wrote numerous different range of topics, often focused on Jewish, because she was personally connected. But the most famous important works include The Region of Totalitarianism, The Human Condition, Eichmann in Jerusalem, but today we're going to talk about the region of totalitarianism. So, it's an important text, book, because it understands how totalitarian regimes such as Nazism and Stalinism emerged and why they were able to take hold of entire societies in the 20th century. Arendt investigates the deep causes and mechanisms behind the rise of such regimes, offering insights into the social, political, and historical conditions that make totalitarianism possible. So, Arendt's main goal in this work was to explore the origin of this regime. So he made some, she wrote some questions like what happened during the 20th century that allowed such oppressive regimes to emerge. Why did it happen, and why and how was it possible for totalitarian regime to gain control? So, Arendt analysis addressed how the world found itself in a situation where entire population could be manipulated and controlled by this regime, and she compared and contrasted Nazism and Stalinism, and analyzing them as two forms of the same totalitarian system, and both regimes employ similar tactics of control, like terror and repression, use of ideology to justify their action and to suppress any position and cult of personality. Then Arendt argues that totalitarianism emerged out of specific historical condition, which is imperialism, anti-Semitism, and decline of class-based society. And then also Arendt stressed that terror is central to the functioning of totalitarianism regimes, as the professor said earlier. And this terror comes in two forms: the secret police, where they oppress the opposition, and the concentration camps and death camps, like regime is North Korea, which is one of the most extreme example. And this country is ruled by Kim family dynasty, and right now it's being ruled by Kim Jong-un. And I think everyone knows how it's going right now. They don't have any liberties, not freedom of speech. They have to attend all the celebrations, all the military parades. They don't even have a private life because they camera everywhere, and even when you do something, a little something, you've been like in detention, something like that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good presentation, Erika. And also thank you for your support in organizing the conference. Very good presentation. You also took 30 cum laude at the exam, right? Congratulations. Danke. You speak German too, eh? Wow. So, do you speak Philippine?
Of course.
What else?
English, French.
Italiano, so the Sicilian, let's say, yeah. More Sicilian, strict Sicilian. So Anna Arendt made all this theory of totalitarianism. Okay, made all this theory of totalitarianism. The concept was already, somebody used it, but she really made a philosophical, theoretical concept in the history of political thought. Okay? So what happened is that when Eichmann goes to Jerusalem to get the trial, she sees the opportunity to see how totalitarianism actually works in the choices, in the decisions, in the behavior of one person who was really important part of a totalitarian regime. So she goes to Jerusalem and she thinks, right now I can discover how it actually works. I can investigate how it actually works. I will write for the New York Times and I will further develop my theory. So she goes to Jerusalem, okay?
I'm standing in front of a building where in only a few hours' time, what is being described as the trial of the century will begin, and the eyes of the world will fall upon Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi responsible for organizing the mass murder of 6 million European Jews. It isn't only Eichmann who will be on trial over the next few days and weeks. The state of Israel will also be under intense scrutiny as it attempts to mount a fair trial of the man tasked with destroying the Jewish people. This city, this country, the entire world is under a state of heightened anticipation. The stakes could not be higher.
In televising this trial, the state of Israel hopes to show many of its own people across the world the full horror of what befell those of their faith who lived in Europe through the Nazi era. Israel hopes to impart to a new generation an understanding of the cunning cruelty employed by the Nazis to lure their people to their deaths through the lie they were being sent to work camps. And it is also seeking to impress on the consciousness of humanity that these crimes, which have no precedent in the entire history of man on earth, were committed in an enlightened age, on Jews this time, but could be committed against others in the future, to show the world that, in the end, this is a crime that affects every one of us.
This is it. Moment of truth.
What are you thinking at this precise moment?
Of everything that could go wrong. All right, John. Rehearsal is over.
So what they did, this guy, Eichmann, so what he did basically is he exterminated 6 million European Jews who were innocent. They did nothing. They just
The
were
testimony
Jewish.
that convicted Adolf Eichmann of Holocaust atrocities.
So he killed 6 million people, not because they made a felony, just because they were Jewish. Okay, he organized a technology to kill all of them through gas. You know, children, mothers, old people. You know, starving and dying. That was the plan. So, you know, the answer is, but we are liberal democracies. We believe in our values so much that we want to give him a fair trial. So they put it in a fair trial, they give him a lawyer, they give him the possibility to say I'm innocent for this. So they said, okay, let's do a fair trial. You have the opportunity to defend yourself, because we're liberal democracies. And, you know, even though you killed all our population, 6 million people, we want you to have a fair trial. In front of a room in Jerusalem, where you have all the relatives of all these people who died in the concentration camp. But they even protected, so nobody could shoot him, nobody could aggress him, and so on and so forth. So, and they want to listen, they want to do a fair trial. So, I sit down and tell us. So it's normal, like everywhere in liberal democracy. So Hannah Arendt goes there and listens.
Genauso wie ich auf dem Standpunkt stehe. Ich habe hier einen Eid geleistet, dass ich die Wahrheit sage. Genauso habe ich auf dem Standpunkt gestanden. Zu jener Zeit, Eid ist Eid. Glauben Sie, dass jemand, der diesen Treueeid schwor, nach dem Tode Hitlers von seinem Eid befreit sei oder nicht? Nach dem Tode Hitlers ist selbstverständlich jeder Mann automatisch von diesem Eid befreit. In Ihrer polizeilichen Vernehmung.
So what does he say? He starts saying, yeah, but I was a public servant. I entered the government under the Chancellor Adolf Hitler, and I swear that I was respecting, the Third Reich and the German Constitution written by Hitler. So I was respecting this sword that I made. So, yeah, and here Hannah Arendt starts to say what's going on.
Wenn Ihnen der Reichsführer gesagt hätte, dass Ihr Vater ein Verräter sei, hätten Sie ihn eigenhändig erschossen. Ist das richtig? Wenn er Verräter gewesen wäre, am Nein, wenn der Reichsführer Ihnen gesagt hätte. Hätten Sie ihn erschossen, den eigenen Vater? Dann sitzt es voraus, hätten wir es nachweisen müssen. Wenn er es nachgewiesen hätte, wäre ich verpflichtet gewesen, mein Vater. Hat man Ihnen nachgewiesen, dass die Juden müssen vernichtet werden?
So what does he say? He says, I swore, I was a public servant, I had the duty to protect the Germans against this threat. So he said, so if your father was a traitor against the German, would you have killed your father? And they say, yeah, this was my duty, so I would have even killed my father.
Ich habe sie vernichtet. Haben Sie nie einen Konflikt geführt, einen Gewissenskonflikt zwischen Ihrer Pflicht und zwischen Ihrem Gewissen? Man könnte es eher Gespaltenheit nennen. Und zwar eine bewusste Gespaltenheit, wo man sich von der einen Seite in die andere flüchtete und umgekehrt. Man hatte auf sein Gewissen zu verzichten. Bitte? Man hatte auf sein Gewissen, auf sein persönliches Gewissen zu verzichten. Man kann es so ausdrücken. Wenn mehr Zivilcourage gewesen wäre, wäre alles anders gekommen. Sind Sie angefangen? Wenn die Zivilcourage ebenfalls hierarchisch aufgebaut gewesen wäre, ganz klar. Ja, gut. Das war also nicht ein Schicksal, das kommen musste. Aber es ist eine Frage des menschlichen Verhaltens. Es ist eine Frage des menschlichen Verhaltens und sicherlich ist es nun so gewesen, es war die Kriegszeit, Turbulenz, jeder eins hat gesagt, hat ja keinen Zweck, will ich dagegen. Und hat sein Tropfen auf den heißen Stein verdampft und hat gar keinen Zweck, hat über sie noch irgendwelchen Erfolge oder Misserfolge geführt hat. Und so, es muss irgendwie auch in der Zeit liegen, denke ich hier. In der Zeit Erziehung, also weltanschauliche Erziehung.
So what he says is, he says, the judge said, yeah, but you were exterminating people, like this. You didn't have any problem with your consciousness, with your own self. And they say, but I was acting for my state, for my government, in a time where there was war. So we have constraint. When there is war, you must protect your nation, you must protect your state. So basically what Eichmann says is, I was performing my duty as a public servant. I was performing my duty as a servant of the state. I was doing just my job. I was doing my job. So Hannah Arendt got a bit traumatized from this. Why? Because she went to Jerusalem to see Eichmann, and she thought, I will see a monster. I will see the evil. I will see the evil. I will see what is evil in this world. You know, I will see what does it mean. You know, be evil. Be evil. So I will see a monster, because one person organized the mass extermination of 6 million people can only be a monster. But what he found was not a monster, was a employee of the state who was claiming, I was just performing my job as an employee of my government. So this is why she calls it the banality of evil. The banality of evil. You know? So the banality of evil. She was very struck by the fact that it was just performing his work. So the big scandal was that she was writing for the New York Times. The New York Times and all the Jewish and all the relatives of the Jewish exterminated expected articles saying, this guy is a monster, it only deserves to die. It only deserves to die because he was a monster and so on. But what she writes is, I don't see a monster. I see the banality of evil. I see one person who is performing the duty that was requested by his state. He's not even angry, he doesn't even despise the Jewish. You know, he said, I had a duty, I was just obeying my order. I was obeying the orders of the law. So, this is what she calls the banality of evil. And obviously all the Jewish community all over the world got very angry at Hannah Arendt, saying, yeah, but you're kind of justifying this monster. So let's see if we can find the final speech. She was about, to be expelled from the university. So she gathers her students and she say, I'm going to have the last say. She gathers the students and she say, I'm going to do a last lecture about my concept of the banality of evil. But she was very much under attack because people say, yeah, you're kind of justifying. You're not saying he's a monster. You're not saying he has to die.
Perhaps just for today you will allow me to smoke immediately.
Jonas, this was Jonas, another very important philosopher, very angry at her.
So upon the trial of Adolf Eichmann, I assumed that the courtroom had only one interest: to fulfill the demands of justice. This was not a simple task, because the court that tried Eichmann was confronted with a crime it could not find in the law books. The criminal whose life was unknown in any court prior to the Nuremberg trials. But still, the court had to define Eichmann as a man on trial for his deeds. There was no system on trial, no history, no ism, not even anti-Semitism, but only a person. The trouble with a Nazi criminal like Eichmann was that he insisted on renouncing all personal qualities as was nobody left to be either punished or forgiven. He protested time and again, contrary to the prosecution's assertions, that he had never done anything out of his own initiative, that he had no intentions whatsoever, good or bad, that he had only obeyed orders. This typical Nazi creed makes it clear that the greatest evil in the world is the evil committed by nobodies. Evil committed by men without motive, without convictions, without wicked hearts or demonic wills, by human beings who refuse to be persons. And it is this phenomenon that I have called the banality of evil.
Miss Sarah, you're avoiding the most important part of the controversy. You claim that less Jews would have died if the leaders hadn't cooperated.
This issue came up in the trial, I reported on it, and I had to clarify the role of those Jewish leaders who participated directly in Eichmann's activities.
You blame the Jewish people for their own destruction.
I never blamed the Jewish people.
So, okay, there is another part about the Jewish controversy is not very important. So, but what you say, the point is, I was just obeying orders. So, she makes this concept, totalitarianism is not based on evil monsters, based on this banality of evil. So, what does it mean for us, this? What does it mean for whatever we say so far? So, what our courts is about why we invented the state as a way to live politically all together. And we saw how the state is built through sovereignty, through division of power, through popular sovereignty, and so on and so forth. So the point is this the essence of the state? So the question remains, was the rise of totalitarianism in the 20th century merely an historical accident? Or was it a response to something essential in the political self-understanding of the West? So, was totalitarianism a deviation of history, or is sometimes the essence of the modern idea of the state, of the modern idea of sovereignty, of the modern idea of the state as monopoly of violence? From this perspective of traditional political theory, totalitarianism seems clearly contradictory. The prevailing question of political philosophies has been the question of authority. On the one hand, totalitarianism, with its rejection of traditional models of authority, seems an aberration. On the other hand, what appears as a rejection of traditional political forms is really, according to Arendt, a transformation of this form. Is it the monstrous, yet seemingly unswearable claim of totalitarian rule that Frankfurt for being lawless, it goes to the sources of authority? Far from being arbitrary, is more obedient, that far from wielding its power in the interest of a man. So, what is the point? What is the point? What is the point is that we have followed the building of the modern state. We have followed how Hobbes invented the concept of sovereignty. We have followed this idea by Max Weber that the state is the monopoly of violence. Even the idea of Rousseau that you have to give sovereignty to the people, and then when the people is sovereign, everybody has to obey to the rule of the majority, and so on and so forth. So, is in the very idea of the modern state the risk of totalitarianism? And so, for Hannah Arendt, she said, yeah, is it possible? Why? Because she says the concept of power that we have in modern political theory is a concept of power as the ability to say something that then is gonna be obeyed. So the very basic form of power is violence. The most basic form of power is violence. To protect the state, you have to monopolize violence. You have to build a monopoly of violence. So Thomas Hobbes, Machiavelli, Max Weber, all of them think that the basis, the very basis of power is violence. You know? So he says in the idea that the political theory has of power, there is violence. And there is always the possibility of violence. So, indeed, Erika, how do you say violence in German? You don't speak German. She was pretending. Gewalt. Come si dice? Gewalt. Gewalt. So, for example, in German, Gewalt means violence, but sometimes you even use this word to say power. For example, legislative power in German is Gesetzgebende Gewalt. So, the German language even recognizes that the origin of power is violence. And so Hannah Arendt say we have this problem in modern political theory that we conceive power as control. We conceive power as the fact that you say something and the other people obey. We conceive power as the ability to establish a relation of obedience and of command and obedience. But she say this conception has always the risk to bring up totalitarianism. So she wants to promote a new and different ideas of power. For this, she goes back to the ancient Greece, in which in Greece there was, democracy was the public speaking in the assembly, and so she said, power is not domination, power is not violence. You use violence when you don't have power anymore. Violence is only the substitute of power. Totalitarianism doesn't have power. Totalitarianism has violence. It uses fear to dominate. So, she's saying we have to think a new form of power, a new form of politics. Politics is a collective action in a public sphere. Power is participating in this public sphere, is the participation like we addressed at the beginning of the courts in ancient Greece. So we have to rethink power as a relationship of communication and deliberation in the public sphere, and not anymore as domination. So what she says, she thinks that in the modern idea of the democracy, in these ideas of sovereignty, in this idea of the state, and in this idea of even popular sovereignty, there is the risk of establishing totalitarian powers. So right now we go back because we go back to another thinker that says the same thing. That say more or less the same things. Why? Because we have Italian students, they have very weak health. So unfortunately, after 4 weeks being sick, she comes here and she has to present about another author that you remember that say that democracy has the seeds of despotism. Who will say this? Very good. Alex sees the Tocqueville. So we get a little bit back, which is good because, however, next class is going to be about liberalism again and the recap. So we go back because she's alive today, but we don't know if like Monday she has a doctor, so she cannot present on Monday. Last week she was sick, weeks before she was sick. So you never know if we have it now, but you cannot know if she survives. So she presents on Tocqueville.
Okay, I'm here. I'm sorry for the delay.
Important that you survived. Getting a force attached physically that kills you.
I hope this presentation will help you to revise it. And so we know that Alexis de Tocqueville, he was born in Paris in 1805 and he was raised in Paris. He was a French thinker, a member of the Chamber of Deputies, and also he was also the French foreign minister. And he, even though he was raised in Paris, he decided to take he wanted to explore and to study the prison system in the US, and he ended up staying there and studying the democracy system, their form of government, because he was fascinated by it. And we can see that his major works are two, which is Democracy in America and the Old Regime and the Revolution, because as we said, he was from Paris. If we want to talk about the Old Regime and the Revolution, we can say that basically in this work he explains the roots of the democracy, and the roots of the French Revolution, and he basically says that it is impossible in France to have a stable democracy because of all the power that is concentrated in the center of the state, basically. His work still has an impact nowadays because with the Democracy in America he influenced the political thought on democracy, critiqued both aristocracy and democracy, and basically he really helped shape and make us understand what really is democracy about, because he was fascinated by it, but he also saw its flaws. I made a little historical context to try and understand better why he was so fascinated by it, because he was from France, where the political situation was really unstable. There were frequent revolutions, the regime changes. Indeed, he was born when there was Napoleon Bonaparte, and then all the, for example, his parents, they took part of the French Revolution, while in the USA they already had a stable democracy and a constitution, with also the checks and balances which helped this establishment. Also the government type, they had this, in France, this shift between monarchy and republic, while in the US there was this presidential republic. Also the participation, which in democracy is a really important aspect. In France there was this limited voting rights and central authority, while in the US there was this widespread voting, local power, and in general there were also a lot of participation from the citizens with clubs, associations, and so on. And also the role of religion, for he was a really important factor for this stability, because while in France there was always this conflict between the religion and the state, in the US the religion helped shaping the morality of all the people, so in order to to shape their morality and social order, but they stayed separated. And also the freedom and equality, even though France, it wasn't really free at that time, it was still dominated by elites. This was the only, we can say, controversial thing about the US, because even though there was democracy, which means equal rights for everyone, basically, they still had slavery. So this is one thing that he didn't really he criticized, because he also saw, as we said, its flaws. So, democracy in America, these are the main topics that this book discover and cover, and we can see how democracy works in America, what lessons it has to offer for future democratic societies. This is why it is still relevant nowadays. Its strengths, its weaknesses, its challenges, and how democracy shapes society, politics, and individual behavior. Okay, one of the main topics of the book is equality and individualism. Basically, he says that how the equality of conditions, which means that people have all similar opportunities, it could lead to the risk of individualism, which means that people could only focus only on their personal success. So in order to avoid this, he says that it's important to have strong communities and a strong civic engagement. The tyranny of the majority is also one of the main topics of the book. He basically says that because democracy is the power of the majority, this also could take a deviation and lead to the tyranny of the majority, which basically means the risk of losing individual freedom, because if we gave too much power to the majority, then all the individuals could lose their freedom. So it is important to protect all different opinions, all different views, and so on. And this is why also for him it was still really important for people to participate in political life. And then we also talked about the role of religion. This is one of his quotes. He said, "Liberty cannot be established without morality, nor morality without faith." That's because he saw that in America, religion and democracy worked together. They were separated, but they still worked together. Religion encouraged morality and stability. And this separation was the key factor that helped maintain this balance. The importance of civil society, we said he saw how much Americans were invested in the active participation in society. They were used to form lots of associations, clubs, volunteer groups, and these groups helped balance the government power, of course. Also, another topic was the danger of centralized government. This is another quote of his. He said, "The health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens." Still, democracy can lead to an overly powerful government, so people don't, it's important that people don't rely too much on the state, because they could lose their freedom, their individualism. So the solution is still active participation in the politics and local affairs. Okay, so I said it before, Tocqueville's writings continue to shape political thought, offering both admiration and for democratic ideals, but we saw that he also he is really cautious about their potential pitfalls. His work serves as a reminder that democracy is not merely a system of government, but a social and cultural force that requires constant effort to preserve and improve. There was another one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. We wish you a long life, to live a lot, despite viruses and flus. So Tocqueville and Hannah Arendt, they share the same views, because they say, as you see, understand, Tocqueville says democracy is going to become the rule of majority, the tyranny of majority. The majority decides something, and everybody has to allow. Okay, so democracy, you know, democracy is it becomes the despotism of majority. The majority is the mediocrity. You stop thinking and you adapt to the majority. So what Hannah Arendt sees is that democracy, popular sovereignty, brought us the election of Hitler as a cancer. So I mean, she was very, very, very much concerned. She was very much concerned. So what they say, what Alexis de Tocqueville and Hannah Arendt, they say the same thing, because they say, yeah, democracy can be dangerous. So the only way to avoid this dangerous thing for Alexis de Tocqueville was, you know, you have to have civil society, association, and Hannah Arendt also say participation of people is the only thing. So Hannah Arendt was very much, was the, let's say, the founding mother of civil disobedience, non-violent disobedience, activism, and so on. So she say only activism can save democracy, you know. And also what she added compared to Tocqueville is not only a critique of democracy, but what Hannah Arendt says, she said, yeah, but you know, the bureaucratic rationalization of the state, does it brings with us, you know, is it, you know, extermination camp, the ultimate, you know, the ultimate form and the supreme form of the bureaucratic rationalization, of the iron cage, of modern rationalization, and so on. So this means the values of the Enlightenment, the values of the social contract, the values of democracy is going to make us free, or they have the seed of this, or they have somehow inscribed in them, they risk the danger of totalitarianism and the extermination camp. So this is what Hannah Arendt does more than Alexis de Tocqueville. But let's say that both of them developed this critique of democracy, in which you say, does democracy has the seeds of despotism? Does it work, or it brings us to mediocrity, and so on? And so this is the topic of the conference we're going to do on Tuesday. This is the topic I invite you to think about, because we will discuss about this point. So on Monday, we're going to go through the last author, which is an author liberal democratic, so we can do a last thing on liberal democracy, on the welfare state, and so on. I say something about post-colonial theories, and then we discuss a little bit the conference, and maybe we recap the course in view of the final exam. Thank you so much for your